Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're a business executive, you've probably wrestled with the classic AI trilemma. Do you want it fast, smart, or cheap? Usually you gotta pick two. Well, today, we're taking a laser-focused look at the enterprise economics behind Google's newest AI announcements. And we're gonna break down how their latest stack is actually trying to give you all three without any compromises. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our agenda for today. 1. The new AI economics. 2. Orchestrating complex subagents. 3. Zero infrastructure enterprise deployment. And 4. The executive verdict.
Starting off with Section 1, the new AI economics, focusing on Gemini 3.5 Flash.
So the absolute first hurdle you face when scaling AI across an entire organization is, well, prohibitive compute costs, right? The core business challenge really becomes, can you actually get frontier-level intelligence at half the price? Because for a long time, you had to choose. You either got a model that was incredibly smart or one that was fast and affordable. Scaling this stuff without completely bankrupting the IT budget has been a massive headache for executives across the board.
Well, Google's answer to that exact question is a definitive yes. If you look at artificial analysis charts against top-tier competitors, think GPT 5.5 and Claude Opus 4.7, Gemini 3.5 Flash literally sits in the top right corner entirely by itself. What this means is it delivers that frontier-level intelligence, but with output that is 4 times faster than the other leading models. That historical gap between smart and fast, it is rapidly closing.
Now let's talk about the bottom line, because this is where it gets real. Google claims that if a large company shifted 80% of its workload to 3.5 Flash, they could save over $1 billion a year. Now keep in mind, this is Google's own math, and it's definitely in their best interest to highlight those huge numbers. But honestly, speaking neutrally here, a proposition that gives you high-tier automated work at under half the cost of comparable models, that is incredibly hard to ignore for any IT roadmap.
You know, the real proof point behind these external claims is actually their internal adoption. Tracking Google's own internal daily token usage across their developer tools tells a really fascinating story. In March, they were at 500 billion tokens a day. Today, that number is more than 3 trillion a day. Internal usage is doubling every few weeks. It proves their own engineers really leaned on this model. They tested it hard to get real work done before they ever showed it to the public.
Moving right along to Section 2, orchestrating complex subagents with Antigravity 2.0.
Let's be honest, raw computational speed is completely useless without the structure and operational execution to actually back it up, right? That's exactly where Antigravity 2.0 comes in. It is completely pivoted away from being a traditional coding environment. Now it's a standalone desktop app for Mac, Linux, and Windows that's built entirely around running and managing AI agents instead of just editing files. It is essentially a dedicated orchestration command center for your enterprise task automation.
Think of this orchestration kind of like a modern factory floor. In step 1, your main overarching agent receives a complex task. Then, in step 2, it dynamically spins up multiple subagents to handle highly focused subtasks. Step 3 is absolutely crucial. These tasks run asynchronously in parallel, so one stuck job isn't going to block your entire workflow. And finally, in step 4, your main context window stays perfectly clean, while all that heavy lifting gets done in the background.
To really show the tangible scale of this orchestration, Google shared this wild stage demo. They claimed 93 subagents built a fully working operating system framework in about 12 hours, entirely for under $1,000 in compute costs. They even tried to run the video game Doom on it live on stage, and when it failed because it was missing keyboard drivers, an agent literally just wrote those drivers in real time until the game worked. Now look, stage demos are stage demos, so definitely take that exact timeline with a healthy pinch of salt. But it powerfully demonstrates the actual scale of autonomous orchestration that's possible right now.
On a practical level, this gives your engineering teams some powerful, immediate controls. You get an overarching project model that spans multiple folders and permissions. You have commands like /go to run tasks totally unattended to completion, or /grillme, where the agent is forced to ask you clarifying questions first. You can also schedule background tasks and take explicit control of a web browser. Now, to be completely impartial here, competitors like Claude Code and Codex have introduced similar background agents before. Google didn't invent the agent desktop, but Google's massive edge here, it's that underlying engine. The whole shebang runs on the sheer speed and low cost of Gemini 3.5 Flash.
Let's move to Section 3, Zero infrastructure enterprise deployment via the Gemini API.
This right here tackles the final and, frankly, arguably the most frustrating executive hurdle: eliminating massive technical debt and deployment overhead for your engineering teams. The old way of doing AI automation meant your team had to manage complex orchestration code, constantly scaffold sandboxes, and figure out all the tedious hosting and security. The new way? Literally, a single API call spins up an isolated, ephemeral Linux sandbox that Google completely hosts for you. Your agents can reason, call external tools, run code, browse the web, all without your team managing a single piece of the underlying infrastructure.
This drastically changes what your enterprise developers actually interact with day to day. Instead of fighting with servers, they simply define their agents using plain text markdown files, like agents.md, and define capabilities with skill.md. They register it as a managed agent, easily version control it in Git just like regular code, and they can even resume long-running sessions later with all the files and states perfectly intact. It transforms complex infrastructure management into simply editing text files, which is a massive win for reducing your time to market.
And finally, Section 4, the executive verdict.
Let's summarize by bringing all three of these disparate layers together to form one complete enterprise AI ecosystem. So Gemini 3.5 Flash gives you a 4x speed boost and massive 50% cost reductions. Antigravity 2.0 leverages that incredible speed for asynchronous, complex task automation. And then the Gemini API deploys it all with zero infrastructure cloud sandboxes. So why does this ultimately matter to you? Because Google is no longer just selling 4 disparate agent products. They are selling a single, highly cost-effective engine, unified across your entire enterprise stack. It's a real game changer.
So I'll leave you with this thought. Is your organization's infrastructure ready to scale frontier intelligence across all workloads? As we've seen today, that traditional barrier of having to choose between cost, speed, and intelligence, it's basically been shattered. I highly encourage you to consider how this fast, smart, and remarkably cheap stack is going to reshape your own engineering roadmaps as we head into the next quarter. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.